Nigeria's inflation rate surged to a staggering 34.19% in June 2024 from the previous month's 33.95%, underscoring the relentless pressure of the purchasing power of consumers and the urgent need for decisive actions to address the rise. According to the latest data from the National Bureau of Statistics, the primary driver behind this surge is the relentless rise in food prices, which have become a burden for households across the nation. In June, food inflation rose to 40.87%, putting more pressure on essential commodities such as bread, cereals, oil, potatoes, yam tubers, as well as fish and fruits. Let's get talking. I'm being joined by the Chief Investment Officer at AfriInvest West Africa, Mr. Robert Omotunde. Good afternoon. It's good to have you in the studio.
Thank you very much for having me. Good afternoon.
Well, most times we have you when we have figures around inflation, and it's not really looking good, I must tell you. From 33.95%, and now we are at 34.19%. Some people projected 34.25%, and now we are doing 34.19%. Should I start with what did you project, and how are we still? Are we going to continue on this to see this increase moving forward?
Well, I think that it's not a good thing to analyze to see that Nigeria's inflation is month on month creeping up and worsening the livelihood of the generality of the Nigerian population. The truth is that from a projection point of view, we were not expecting it to abate. As a matter of fact, what came was in line with what we expected. And I'm sorry to convey this message, but I think that it's going to get worse as we go into, the months further into the year. Now, the reason is because the central bank, in its wisdom, has chosen to tackle inflation, the current inflationary pressure we are seeing. They have chosen to tackle it using the instrumentality of monetary policy. Yeah. Now, the issue with that approach is that, generally speaking, inflation can be caused by supply-side factors, and it can be caused by, monetary factor, monetary phenomenon like, what economists call, demand pull inflation, or is cost push. But what we have right now is a cost push-driven inflation as against a demand pull inflation. It is more effective to use monetary policy when the dimension of inflation is demand pull. But the current inflation we're experiencing now has a supply side dimension to it, it has a consumer behavior dimension to it, and it has a mathematical dimension to it. And that is why if the central bank will stick to its gun and continue to increase monetary policy rate or show a sign of tightening in this economy, we may not see inflation abating anytime soon. I dare say that for some reasons, if central bank did nothing by hiking interest rates, we could have even seen some more, improvement in the figures. And why did I say that? The current tightening cycle started sometime in May 2022, during the dispensation of the previous central bank. And that was the period leading to the election of 2023. And that tightening cycle continued. And from that time till now, we have not seen any major improvement. As a matter of fact, if you look at the month-on-month increases in the consumer price index, which is the index for measuring inflation, you will see that it is worsening. From 2021 average of about 1.22%, it worsened in 2022 to about 1.63%. That is the average month-to-month increases in the consumer price index. In 2023, it became worse, printing at around 2.14% on the average. Now, in 2024, so far, we have seen 6 months of inflation figures, and we have seen it worsen to about 2.59%. The projection is that before the end of this year, if the central bank does not stop this tightening cycle, it will worsen to as high as 3% month-on-month average inflation. And at that level, what you will see is that inflation is likely going to close at 39% before the end of the year. We have analyzed before that the current, inflation phenomenon is not such that you can use instrumentality of interest rates
to address
100%. You have to use it in a cautious manner. You read it out in your introduction. We saw that we have seen increase in pump price of petrol.
Yeah.
We are seeing depreciation in our currency, and then we are seeing other supply side issues affecting inflation. Excuse me, if there are security issues affecting farmers to go to the farm, how do you solve that problem? By raising interest rates, making it worse for the citizens that are having to buy their food items at a much more higher price. Because you have raised prices, what you are doing invariably is that the imported food, they will have to pay higher for it. Apart from the fact that, the government thinks that, or the central bank thinks that hiking interest rate at this point can help you to manage exchange rate. Now, you may have some point there, but all that it is about the economy is not about managing the exchange rate. As a matter of fact, we need to be a bit more cautious the way we are going aggressively with these interest rate hikes. Now, this is putting pressure on a lot of manufacturers. The manufacturers are having to price credit at a much more higher rate. In fact, the central bank has even squeezed out naira liquidity in the system and is worsening the situation with the interest rate market. And as much as that continues, you are not necessarily solving the inflation problem. You are worsening it. Why I'm saying you are worsening it is because, can you see the data from 2021, 2022, 2023? We are now in 2024. And in 3 good years that tightening has been on, you have not seen any improvement in inflation. As a matter of fact, it continued to worsen.
Allow me, Button.
Yes.
I apologize. There was a time we saw month-on-month reduction.
Only once in 2 years, and that happened in 2022. And it was a marginal month-on-month reduction. So if you look at month-on-month data from that 2022 hiking till date, we have had one drop in month, at least in the last 2 years, one drop in month-on-month. In inflation figure, when you look at the, so what I mean is when you look at the average year-on-year inflation figure, right? So that is the inflation figure that we print on a monthly basis. Inflation is a year-on-year data. So the inflation figure we have reported in the last 2 years has dropped once in the last 2 years. So we have been seeing, so if you plot inflation chart in the last 2 years, you will see that the trajectory is up. Of course, month on month, you will see month on month drops. The central bank governor mentioned it, that it has halved between February till date. Now, month on month figure is halving. But the truth is that inflation in itself is not moderating. Because what is month on month? Month on month only tells me that if inflation was X last month, this month, inflation is now X plus whatever month on month has increased by. And we have not seen drop in month on month inflation. In other developed economies where tightening is done, you can't tighten for 2 years and not see even one data of drop in a month-on-month inflation. So as we are tightening, inflation is increasing on a month-on-month basis. As we speak now, we are dealing with a month-on-month data around 2.something% levels. Meanwhile, naturally, the month-on-month data for inflation in Nigeria should print between 0.5 to maybe around 1.5%. But what we are seeing right now is abysmal. And I'm just saying that, you see, we don't always have to listen to the Bretton Woods institution. The World Bank and the IMF, because sometimes they do not understand what is going on in our economy. What is going on here is practical. It's beyond some theoretical, provisions that whenever there is inflation in the system, you can just hike interest rate. It doesn't always work like that. And I'm saying that there are traceable means to which you can see how higher interest rate is worsening the current level of inflation we are seeing. I know the central bank will say that, if you don't tighten, it will have been worse. But I dare say no. I dare say no, because sometimes, because you are hiking, we have not even seen the impact of that hike that we are doing yet. We are not seeing it yet, because inflation is worsening, and I just gave you the data. The year-on-year inflation figure we released on a monthly basis has dropped marginally once in the last 2 years. So how can we tighten aggressively like this? Remember, we were coming from as low as 12% levels in NPR. And now look at the level we are in NPR. Right now, people are buying bills, federal government instruments, either from OMO auction or from Treasury bills auction, and it's printing at a yield of about 27%. right? Yeah. So, and I'm telling you that is even worsening the situation in the system, because the commercial, I mean, the corporate sector, I mean, the private sector that is having to borrow through commercial paper, they are paying higher. The implication of that is that if they can pass those costs to the consumers, you are going to see, depending on the elasticity of demand of those products, and some of those companies have inelastic demand, which means that as prices are being, hiked, and businesses are having to borrow at a higher rate, they will pass those costs to the consumers, and inflation will just keep rising. I mean, we are talking about inflation for food at about 40% as we speak. It's going to get worse because there is nothing happening on the security. I mean, you can see that the government is even bothered trying to, open the strategic reserves, partnering to remove some tariffs on importation of food and all of those. Government is doing all that they need to do. Yeah. But the fundamental issues we still need to address are the security concerns that is preventing farmers from doing their job. Because it is better for us to produce most of these foods locally. If you have to resort to importing food that you would naturally produce in Nigeria, look at tomato. People are looking for alternatives to just make ends meet. We can't solve this problem by just hiking interest rate, which the central bank continues to do. And that is the basis of my argument. The unfortunate thing is that in the country, we don't have a complex macroeconomic model where we can see when we tweak interest rate, how does it implicitly impact on other variables that will definitely impact on your inflation figure? Because now we are not seeing the progress. That's the truth.
But talking about that fiscal and monetary handshake again, because we are tilting towards that end now.
Absolutely.
When the monetary guys are doing all of this that they're doing, and we also hear of duties and tariffs on some of this food stuff to be suspended and all, do you think that we could get it right when this happens and when we complement each other?
Absolutely. We will always get it right if there is that, complementary effort coming from the fiscal side and the monetary side. On the fiscal side now, I'll come back to that in a bit. What I'm saying is that we shouldn't worsen a situation that is already bad. So what the Monetary Policy Authority is supposed to do is to stabilize prices. Right now, we have not achieved the objective of stabilizing prices. Stabilizing prices means that if inflation last month, this month now, we are printing at about 34%. If we're going to ensure stability, at least keep the prices where they are right now. Let's not see another month-to-month increase to, say something like 2% increase month-to-month. Because the moment you see 2% increase month-to-month, there's some mathematical interplay. I also mentioned that because you see consumer behavior interplay or dimension to it. There's a mathematical dimension. Because right now, even if you see a slight increase month-to-month, in the month of July, by the next inflation figure that is going to be released in August, the tendency is that you're going to see a drop in headline inflation. That is not an improvement. It has actually worsened. But mathematically, inflation rate has moderated. So central bank can claim and say that, what we are doing is working. But that's not the truth. Because if I have a month-to-month inflation of 2.5%, let's say this month, and the next month I have a 2.6%, my situation is worse. But mathematically, the headline inflation could come down. So definitely, there is a need for handshake between the fiscal authority and the Monetary Policy Authority. One of the things the fiscal guys can do at the moment, they can't do much more than what they're already doing, right? But I think one of the things that can address the problem in the interim is to get the security problems resolved. We have, look at the Middle Belt and all of those places where our agricultural sector is thriving. We can do better. Right? If the government needs to declare emergency on security concerns, we need to do it. This problem has been on.
Even the food oil theft thing, there was a meeting yesterday, very serious meeting, and all of the, military forces, and they all came out to say it is an emergency, and the president says this must be addressed. I think that also has to be done with regards to agriculture.
Absolutely.
For our farmers to be able to go to the farms, because we can't address this issue of food inflation, which remains on the high side if that is not done. So we are expecting another MPC for next week, I guess, I think very closely. What do you think would form a discussion at this round table? Because a lot needs to be done, but you don't expect any increase anymore, right?
Well, let me say it this way. Expectation is one thing. But the body language
is another.
Of the central bank is another. Now, it is clear that the body language of the central bank right now is that they believe that tightening will get us out of the current cycle. And I don't think so. And I don't want to be the prophet of doom, but I'm saying to you that if this tightening spree doesn't stop now, inflation will get worse. That is definitely going to happen. Well, except, there are some miracles that happen that prevents that. Because the action of the Monetary Policy Authority in increasing interest rate, every time they are meeting, is having direct impact, direct negative consequence on the economy. Because right now, I'm not even sure we have studied to see the limit of the capacity of the economy to absorb interest rate shocks, right? What we are seeing now is a significant interest rate shock from where the economy used to be. We have an interest rate environment that was below a 20% threshold, at some point 15%. In 2020, we are at a single-digit interest rate environment. And now we are talking about 25%, 27%, almost eating 30% from the private sector issuances. It is a major shock on the economy. Have we analyzed to see how the economy is responding? And you can see it now. It's deteriorating even the fiscal finances of government. As you can see, because government is having to borrow at a much more higher rate, the money the government does not have, the government is having to pay it as interest expense to service all of its debt. And the accrual is massive. Honestly speaking, the central bank and the Ministry of Finance, they need to be talking right now. If a Ministry of Finance, there's some selfish parts to this, which is that, and in economics, we believe that it is the selfishness of every economic actor that gets the economy moving, right? The consumer is selfish, the producer is selfish, but the market is there to regulate. From the perspective of the Ministry of Finance, their disposition right now should be how low can government borrow? Yeah. Because it is clear that the revenue profile of the government is not enough to fund our expenditure or our lifestyle, I would say, as we speak, which means that the government will continue to borrow. Then if we continue to borrow, we should be interested in at what rate we are borrowing. So the handshake now should be the Ministry of Finance speaking with the central bank to ensure that there is no interest rate level that could get the economy, to a terminal level that we may not be able to salvage. And that is the point I'm trying to make here. The truth is that we are in a serious situation that we need to fix. Inflation is not good for any economy. But solving the problem is more important than to be seen to be following some theoretical provision about what we should do whenever there is interest rate. In the developed system, when you see interest rate hikes, right, it has a direct transmission to market rates and how this affects the economy eventually. Right? And in some instances, after a number of hikes, you may begin to see the impact. As we see in the US, in the UK, in the ECB, in the European region, it's happening all over. But in our case, that has not been the case. We may say that we came late to the party in tightening, but we started in 2022, 2 years. Yeah. And 2 years after, we have not seen the impact on prices. The truth is that if we must get ourselves out of this, we need to pause, first of all. First of all, let us analyze all of the tightenings that we have done. What direct impact did it have on the economy? Did it worsen our inflation profile, or did it improve it? Now, when we have seen that data, we can now begin to know what next are the actions to take. Because what I can tell you is that the private sector is really suffocating at the moment. And even in the financial space, you will see that a lot of the banks are now scrambling for liquidity, plus the addition that the central bank is asking them to recapitalize. All of those issues are still on the front burner. So for us to solve the problem, we need to go back to the drawing board and be more deliberate in seeing how these things are. We have sufficient data, 2 years data. From my analysis, I think that the hikes have worsened the inflation figure, but I won't claim to be 100% right. But the central bank has all the experts that can do the job to see what is the impact of the tightening that we have done, and how has it impacted in solving inflation problem. You see what I mean? Then on the fiscal side, the government will also need to help moderate all of the security concerns so that we can come out of this problem faster.
Amos, thank you so much. Interesting conversation always when we have you here. I've been speaking to Mr. Robert Omotunde. He is the Chief Investment Officer with AfriInvest West Africa, breaking down inflation figures, expectations, and what it means, of course, for Nigerian economy. Thank you. There's never enough time to talk about Nigeria's economic issues, but of course, we'll have you again.
Thank you.